Good morning, good evening, very good morning to our friends in East Coast and Canada. John is joining us, in a few minutes. He had some problem with the connection, and we're going to start this session. Isabella had also a problem, but that's our day-to-day life. With the investment world, they are in high demand, and some are stuck, in board meetings. So, nevertheless, we're going to have, the essence of the panel with Andreea doing the introduction, Antonin, and we go, through the introduction afterwards. So for now, I'm going to give the floor to my friend Andreea. She's working at DG MARE. She's the head of unit for the blue investment, and she will tell us where we stand in terms of blue investment in Europe. Andreea, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pierre. Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for having me today here. It's a pleasure. So briefly, let's see a little bit the universe in which we work and what we are doing and why we are doing. If we take the example of the seaweed, of course, that everything has to be linked in the political context. Everybody is probably aware that the level of ambition in Europe, as mentioned in the European Green Deal, so it's about decarbonization, but also looking at more sustainable, of course, ways also of producing our food. There are two factors that are driving, I would say, the expansion of the seaweed cultivation. We know that there is massive expansion also of the wind energy offshore. We'll need 5 times more by 2030, which gives some space further from the coast. And from here, of course, there are all the benefits that are linked to infrastructure. And the second one, of course, is the shortage of land. We cannot produce and continue to produce all the food on land. We need, in the same time, land for carbon sequestration, and that puts a lot of pressure on land for aquaculture. So what we did up to now, looking again at the seaweed, we are now starting Horizon Europe, the main instrument looking at research and innovation of the European Union, but we have to look as well that more was already achieved in terms of research and innovation in Horizon 2020. There were several projects that addressed and they look at algae, either from the perspective of food, either from the perspective of being a raw material for the biofuels. Just to give an example, a project at sea that develop a way of achieving between 3 and 5 times the yield for a given amount of space. We are looking because, of course, there are a lot of challenges if we want to produce the seaweed. There are the ones that are linked with the fact that currently the methods are quite labor intensive and probably not the yields that we like, but also the fact that we need to address, I would say, the entire chain of production. But getting all these projects from Horizon 2020 to the market, it's a challenge. And here we arrive to cross so-called valley of death that you are all aware on how we can support, I would say, the companies to arrive at the commercial field. And here we arrive with what we did until now. So in terms of investments, we started in 2019, the Blue Economy Window. The Blue Economy Window provided grants that enable companies to bring their services and products to the point where they were bankable. This might include producing a demonstrator, getting certification, or marketing activities. And there are numerous examples that can be presented. Recently, the call of 2020, the second one, is successfully, I would say the evaluation was successfully completed. We cannot communicate before the contracts are signed, but there are, I would say, interesting projects there selected, and I invite you when this is official to look at. Now, for the next period of time, we are moving under, I would say, another environment, because we'll be focusing more on financial instruments. So leveraging the EU contribution, but also crowding in private investments, focusing on companies with real growth prospects, and also looking in the perspective that a support that all of these can bring to the green, digital, inclusive, and resilient economic recovery. So we are in front, I would say, of another 7 years in which they will have interesting instruments that can be used for the seaweed, I would say, seaweed world, at least in Europe. But of course, not to be forgotten that in some cases, in these projects, also participation from outside Europe is allowed. So we have, first of all, the European Investment Council. And here there are the Pathfinder grants up to 4 million that are going to support scientists, startups, SMEs, and specific challenges. Here we are speaking really about basic research because it's TRL from 1 to 3. But it doesn't stop here, because we have also the transition strand with grants up to 2.5, which is based on the results of EU projects. Here we are speaking about single applicants or small consortia, mostly bottom-up. And the parts which arrives supporting the close to market projects it's the accelerator strand, grants and investments looking at game-changing innovation for SMEs, and again, bottom-up. This is the first, I would say, instrument. The second one, it's InvestEU. And InvestEU, it's going to have a dedicated budget for blue economy. It will build on the success that we already achieved in the first 2 years. So in collaboration with InvestEU, EIF, and also co-investment from European Maritime Fisheries and Aquaculture Fund, and also external finance, we are going to put a package at the level of 140 million per year. So a lot of money that are going to be available to, I would say, blue economy. But of course, seaweed can benefit from this. So how we also support, because sometimes it's not probably the most obvious for the companies to go and to access these funds. We have a technical assistance platform. So we are doing, I would say, the Blue Invest coaching. We are preparing the companies to arrive at the point to be bankable. So it's the coaching, and until now we provided more than 200 companies with business coaching. It's also the pipeline in which we have almost 200 projects at the moment. So we work with companies to support them to showcase their products, their services. We are working on checking on the quality and eligibility of projects, and not the less important, it's all the matchmaking events. Probably you are aware that Blue Invest, it's already a well-established, I would say, event. It takes place every year, usually in February. So if you are interested, please watch, because I can tell you that the day will be fixed quite soon, and we'll communicate when this will be happening exactly in February. So there are events, but also webinars where the companies have the possibility to pitch to investors. I would say that it's a full universe of support. And if there are among the ones listening to us, SMEs, startups that are interested to get in this universe and to benefit, I would say, for the support that we are offering, we are always open, and with all the pleasure, do not hesitate to get in contact with us, with myself. So as for the introduction, this is what I wanted to say. And of course, I will stay with you for the rest. Thank you very much.
much, Andreea, for this thorough introduction, and of course we will touch base on this. So as we have John, I will take the opportunity to ask him to introduce himself before he's disappearing again, and then after I will go to Antonin. John, can you hear me? Are you on Earth? Where are you, John? You're in the north? No, John is not responding. So Antonin, you go ahead. You introduce yourself.
Good morning. Good morning, Pierre. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm Antonin Calzarossa. So I'm working for the EIB, so the European Investment Bank, and I'm basically in charge of corporate finance, mainly outside of the EU. Given that EIB is also active outside of the EU, so namely in Africa, Asia, Latin America. So I'm very glad to be here today, and thanks again for inviting EIB to participate to this very interesting event. And I think we still have lost. John is still not here.
So when John will have a steady connection, we'll try to get him for some questions. But let's start immediately, the discussion. And there's a lot to say about, the European support, the possibilities, the connection. So, we will start with that. So we know that, and the two sessions this morning, especially the ones in Australia, were very focused on the potential of the industry and the emerging activities around seaweed. And Caroline Macmillan, the chief scientist, insisted, on the role of governments to support, this nesting industry, and they are putting lots of money on this. So it seems that some of the countries, Asia, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, North America, are very well advanced on the seaweed vertical business. And my first question, maybe to Andreea or Antonin, would be why does it take so much time, for Europe to develop this sustainable seaweed industry? Because Andreea mentioned that we are putting lots of money on the table. We are supporting, by all means, all the efforts from the industry. So what did we do wrong? Andreea, you want to start?
Yes, of course, I can start. So I think that probably the markets that you mentioned, Pierre, outside Europe, probably they are a little bit more advanced on the demand side, I would say. If we are taking as an example the use of seaweed, let's say, as food, we are not probably in Europe so much accustomed to having it as a part of the diet. We work with European Institute of Technology, Knowledge Innovation, and there is a dedicated community on food that is looking at the consumer demand. We may also need some research for its use as animal food. So I think probably there is still a work to be done in order to have these products more, I would say, developed from the demand side. This is looking, if we are looking from the perspective of food, but of course, we need to look more than food, and to be able, I would say, to develop the demand side, but also to be able to offer to the industry probably the quality of the products that they need to develop the solutions that can be placed later on the European market. From the point of view of consumers, probably for the food there is a problem, but for all the other all the other products that can be developed based on seaweed, I think that if the industry is able to have access to the quality products, I think that from the consumer perspective, it's always, I would say, an angle of sustainability of reliable products on which they are looking at, and the potential is there. So probably more work to be done, but this requires that I would say the whole chain from research up to the market works together. Maybe to develop a cluster in Europe and to look on this, it will not be a bad idea.
Totally agree, 100%. And Antonin, from the EIB point of view, have you seen, this I would say shift between Europe and the rest of the world, or is it still not on your radar because it's too tiny? What do you think about this growing seaweed industry?
Yeah, no, thanks, Pierre. No, I mean, so effectively, I think Andreea, Andreea is really right, in saying that effectively, the market, the market in Asia, is much bigger, is much more mature, but it's also given the fact that some countries in Asia, started, kind of intensive cultivation. Much earlier as well, compared to Europe, when it comes to seaweed aquaculture. And so, basically, given this, the industry in Asia is also, I believe, a bit more sophisticated. But effectively, I would say, as you rightly mentioned, we also see that there's lots and lots and more positive signals, when it comes to effectively the development of the seaweed industry in Europe. So there's been lots of technological progress, in terms of both production and processing. As you mentioned as well, there's also a growing demand, both at the European level and globally. Demand for biomass, for protein, organic, chemical, and other, basically, other product derived from seaweed. No, so I would say overall, there's lots of positive signal. Then it's true that we, there's also going to be the question of the cost of the production cost in Europe, compared to other geographies. But I'm sure we'll discuss later. Meaning that it may also be needed, to invest more in larger scale facilities, and obviously increase the production. In terms of financing, so it's true that financing is sometimes the bottleneck, but as we already started to mention, given that effectively, the EU has announced the European Green Deal, given that effectively, on top of that, we also have the EU recovery plan, basically to recover from the COVID crisis. So I would say that in terms of financing, when you look at what is currently available, from both the European Commission, from the European Investment Bank, for other European entities and other national banks, there's effectively lots of funding available and lots of programs, that are developing specifically around the blue economy. So including obviously seaweed. Yes, so I also believe that that all this will also tend to improve and create a stronger ecosystem. So I basically believe that naturally the sector will grow. Will grow in Europe, and obviously EIB and other financiers will be here also to accompany this growth of the sector, when it comes to both large project, large entities, but also when it comes to SMEs and startup.
So, John, can you hear us? John?
I can now hear you and see you.
Good. I had the feeling that since the Brexit, we cut, the relationship in terms of telco between Europe and the UK. But hopefully you're in Scotland, so maybe you'll be reconnected soon.
Yeah, no, we're back and connected. I don't know what happened. Sorry.
Okay. So, John, when I met you 1.5 years ago, you came to me and say, I want to learn about seaweed. 1.5 years ago, you're the most knowledgeable family office around seaweed. Tell us about you. Tell us about DC Thomson. And my first question will be, why are we so behind compared to US, Canada, Asia, Australia? And how do you explain that in terms of seaweed development?
So DC Thomson's is a family-owned business in Scotland, focused on printing and publishing, but we also have a significant investment division, and I lead our investments into private equity companies. The areas we focus on are retail and online, ag tech, the circular economy, water economy. We've been looking at for we've looked at a considerable number of companies in that time. I think my sense is on this, Europe versus the rest of the world is perhaps picking up on one or two of the themes that I heard intermittently as I was trying to rejoin the call. Is the blend of public and private support for these activities is perhaps not as advanced as it is in America and Canada and in Asia. I think the climate probably plays a part in Northern Europe in particular, relative to some parts of Africa, and I think my sense is, particularly in Europe, the demand for materials produced from seaweed vastly outstrips the available supply at the current time, in particular the supply of environmentally friendly produced seaweed. So I think if you look at some of the projects in North America, they're definitely, the infrastructure is there. I think the mindset of investors is possibly more advanced, and they're ready to they've had experience of, for example, in North America, they've had more experience of supporting a growing cannabis and medicinal herb industry already, so they're perhaps more attuned to the financing requirements associated with the early stage farming of the production of seaweed and also refining of seaweed. And also in the projects that I've looked at in Australia, certainly they've done very well in looking at how to finance and secure offtake agreements to de-risk projects very, very effectively, and often reusing brownfield sites in a creative way to produce seaweed. So I think it will come, it has to come in Europe, and I think there's a lot of will, and I think that the industry will undoubtedly mature, and you may see some consolidation of small suppliers. We've already seen that in certain parts of Europe, but my sense is that it's heading in the right direction. It's just still quite nascent relative to other parts of the world.
Interesting. And John is totally right, on the scaling up. At this stage, we're facing a few, I would say, issues. The cultivation is not there. We have only a tiny numbers of companies that are cultivating. The cost, the labor cost, is very much expensive, in Europe compared to Africa, Asia, and that will be something that could hinder, the development of an industry, except if we get into more technology. And the segments, the consumer, I have the feeling that the consumer is not, it's what you said, Andreea, is not very much in line with the potential of seaweed. So we talk about seaweed and in between, partners from the industry, and we know all the benefits. But I think that the final consumer has not understood that seaweed is not the ugly thing that you find on the beach when you go at summertime, but it brings, added value in terms of feed, food, cosmetic, pharmaceutical, bioplastic, not to mention. And now the big trend is also hydrogen, because we talk about hydrogen, and the green-blue biohydrogen is coming potentially from the fermentation of seaweed. And our friend, from CELT Marine Group is working on something that could accelerate, the production of this green hydrogen. So my next question, now that we understand, where's the value chain, so what could, EU and the European funds play in structuring this seaweed sector? Andreea, you made an amazing list of all the vehicles that you've developed, so far. I would like also to understand what the EIB can take, and see what will be the accelerator factor, because most of the company, they are tiny, they are small. We are not reach, the growing stage. So what could be, the accelerator factor from EU and the EU fund? Andreea, you want to start?
Yes, I can start. On our side, of course, we support it, and I would say quite a lot of research. I think that first of all, for the industry, it's quite important to look on what is already achieved. Probably everybody will be amazed if you go in the database of Horizon 2020 projects, because this is already, I would say, completed, and trying to see what are the projects in the sector that were supported and what can be taken, I would say, not to try to reinvent the wheel. What we need to do, starting from research, probably better communicate around the results of the projects. In the same time, to allow, of course, the industry to know what already, I would say, proved as being a quite interesting solution and having a potential. From the point of view of investment, specializing in specializing for the blue economy, I think that already we did. It's also the part of the industry that has to be played, I would say, because also the EU role for the blue economy until now was more, I would say, in regulation, because we had already, and there is a directive for maritime special planning, which already, I would say, opened the door for the member states to plan the use of their waters and how they are going to open, I would say, the doors for the cultivation, for the aquaculture. We did a work as well in terms of guidelines for aquaculture that were recently issued by the Commission, but also there is a work which was done for the labeling. There is a need, and I think that a community it's already building, I would say. There is a need probably that all the good results are, first of all, I would say, better communicated. If we are taking, Pierre, let's say, some European representatives today, I don't know if all of them, they know that maybe some things were already, I would say, research. In the same time, another element that probably not to be neglected is at the level of the member states, it's a lot of work which is done in some regions. In the previous 7 years, it was the smart specialization strategies that allowed already to a lot of regions in Europe, there are more than 40, to look and to specialize in aquaculture. So there is a lot of, I would say, that funding coming from the cohesion policy that goes to the regions that they want to invest in this. So it will be quite interesting to see how we are bringing, I would say, all these regions together, and we allow them to really build on what was achieved until now. For the next 7 years, the Regio is launching the Interregional Innovation Investment, another investment that they will of billion for the support again of the innovation, and it will be again another possibility for the regions to put aquaculture, to put seaweed as the priority. So probably, I mean, we are opening the door. I think it's quite important for actors in some regions to communicate, to get in contact with their region, to say, listen, I want to work on this, let's do it. But in the same times, for regions already, because they know, they can easily know, to come together and to join forces. Probably we work too much, I would say, on an individual base, and we need probably, I would say, a factor, an element which can allow to join based on what we build, based on what was offered, and to see how we can together doing something. It's not everything that can be possible at EU level. Do not to be forgotten that a lot of funds are managed at the level of regions, are managed at the level of countries. So and when we speak about the cohesion policy, this is most of the money. Do not to be forgotten, and not what is coming directly from, I would say, managed at the central level. So more needed also at the level of the regions that have the interest, that have the potential in collaboration with the industry to work together on this and to see how they can develop, I would say, the industry.
We'll come back, on this collaboration, because I think this is key, for developing, the segment. But Antonin, as you work mainly outside Europe, how you link up, the investment that you could do, let's say in Africa, which has one of the largest potential for seaweed organic cultivation in the future, with the European strategy? How can we accelerate the development of this, I would say, cultivation vision and get to the growing stage so we can massively invest for extracting the right compounds and the right product that will serve our industry?
Yeah, no, thanks, Pierre. No, so effectively, basically, as you may know, the European Investment Bank, adopted its climate, what we call the climate roadmap, from 2021 to 2025. And basically, it basically says that EIB commits to do much more, when it comes to climate finance, and also mainly to support the European Green Deal, and it also shows that EIB is willing to do much more, when it comes to climate action and climate mitigation. So basically, that's really our objectives, for all that we do inside the EU, but also outside of the EU. When it comes to financing, to EIB financing specific projects or company, so as you may know, when we finance directly an entity, we tend to finance mainly projects of a certain size. So effectively many projects are not going to come under our radar. We tend, structurally, we tend to work mainly on the larger project, but effectively, increasingly, we've been focusing increasingly also on projects of a smaller size, and whenever a project or a ticket size, is going to be too small for EIB directly, we then finance intermediary, basically, so that's why, we also provide credit lines to commercial banks, for instance. So, this is something we do both, in Europe and in Africa or in other regions. And increasingly, what we did is that we, whenever we lend to a bank, we don't lend a bank. Obviously, we have to make sure that we have a say, basically, and that we monitor what the bank is doing. So increasingly, we've done some thematic credit lines. A lot in Africa, around agriculture, and that were about supporting smallholder farmers. But effectively, what I believe is that increasingly, we'll do that also to cover the blue economy, because effectively, as you mentioned, many projects will not be financeable directly by the EIB, but through other ways. That's why we also invest in venture capital funds. We also invest in impact funds inside the EU and outside the EU. And that's why also I believe that the Blue Invest initiative between the Commission and the European Investment Fund, is a really good example of what could be done as well, to develop the ecosystem of investment funds, that will then invest in smaller scale startup or projects. No, but effectively, I would say that when it comes to EIB, as we are not, and it is also the case for other, development banks or multilateral banks. We cannot support directly projects of any type of size, but effectively we either lend to a company. We also have an advisory, group, within EIB, which is really important, when the advisory or upstream work or project preparation is needed. and we also do blending, which is basically the combination of lending and grants, with grants coming from from other sources, from the Commission or other sources. So ultimately, we are really trying to find, to propose new ways, to de-risk, the project, and to make sure that we manage to also to attract private sector investment, in whatever projects in the sector, in the blue economy or in the seaweed sector that we finance.
Before you comment on this, I will add, another question. You as a family office, you're very careful where you invest, when you invest, and how you can de-risk, your investment. So maybe you will add something on what Antonin said, but I would like, to get your perspective. This is a new sector. We work on some cases that we all know. How do you choose the right one, and how do you make sure that the investment will go in the right direction in the future, meaning less risk on your side?
Multitude of different things to say here. I think that the picking up on the stream a couple of themes that Andreea and Antonin mentioned. My sense is, coming at it from our perspective, is there's a huge amount of support for this industry, but frequently, by virtue of the size and maturity of the companies, they're perhaps insufficiently well structured. So grant and debt finance is coming down the tubes into banks and venture capital funds, but when it gets there, it becomes very tricky to deploy, because sometimes the entrepreneurs just don't have the corporate experience and to put in place the governance and corporate structures that typically investors require in order to deploy funds. So I think there's frequently a need for more support at a grassroots level to make these businesses investor ready. I think there's, and to a point that Andreea was saying, there needs to be a coordinated infrastructure to put in place to support these companies. So yes, there's funds available from Europe, but just taking for example other areas, entrepreneurs find the bureaucracy associated with getting licenses and securing permits. That's another hugely time-consuming area for people to secure, to get into business and even start the road towards viability. These companies that are starting up, funding is just one of the areas of challenge that they face in growing and being successful. And another area that I think more local regions could do to help is the tax infrastructure to incentivize investors to take more risk, perhaps over a slightly longer term. So, for example, taking a theme that's common in Canada is they have flow-through financing for mining companies that's available for several years, and it doesn't necessarily need to be attached to creation of IP, but the investors get the tax relief. Now that is available in various ways to various people, but I feel that more could be done at a country level to create an easier environment to support the development of these businesses. So that's maybe picking up on some of the points that Andreea and Antonin talked about. As an investor, number one, we're looking for good management and good leadership. Number two, we're looking for a site and manufacturing process around the seaweed that we feel is robust and is reasonably secure, so it de-risks many of the risks associated with this activity. And obviously, the viability of it you need to have some line of sight to an offtake agreement or processing agreements that are commercial and understandable. So I think those are the things as an investor which we're looking at and frequently find challenging when we're looking at and considering investments in the seaweed space.
Very interesting, and maybe I will add, an additional question to this, because you know that impact investing is becoming the rule, and you think it could hinder, the deployment of the capital, or is it something that could accelerate? Because we're talking a lot about methane reduction, CO2 capture, CO2 sinking, CO2 offsetting. So we're talking about blue bonds, we're talking about many vehicles that could be developed. We don't see them happening, but do you think it could help or, hinder the industry? John, continue.
I think that the, blue bonds and so on, the whole area of carbon credits is still relatively nascent. And I think it will mature over the next couple of years, and I think it will mature fast. One of the problems I see in is the quantification and the accreditation of bonds associated with carbon capture in the blue economy. I think it's perhaps still behind the capture and accreditation of carbon credits that may be taking place in the agricultural area, for example. And so I think there's still an evolution. There's still the technology still needs to catch up in terms of how you quantify and precisely track the carbon credits coming from the blue economy. That's probably the area that I personally struggle with most, relative to looking at carbon credits from land-based sources. For example, the capture of CO2 from anaerobic digestive plants is an area that I've been looking at recently, and it can be much more empirically quantified, tracked, and measured, which as an investor, when you're thinking about impact, I think is important. That said, the way we approach things is maybe slightly different from others. So for us, we're evaluating projects which first and foremost must have a road path to financial viability, and if they have attributes which include carbon sequestration, then that is a bonus. I think at the moment, as an investor, we are staying away from the fact that there must be empirical commitment within the mission and articles of a company to carbon sequestration of a certain amount, because I feel that is perhaps at this stage excessively, it just imposes another unnecessary level of bureaucracy on companies at a relatively nascent stage. So I think that we find methods of quantifying impact interesting. I think there are a number of them around. Again, that a standardization of that needs to evolve. So when, for example, we look at investment trusts as an investment, many of them are saying they're embedding ESG principles into their mandates. There is no one standard, for example, within the investment industry that says this is the way that should be done. There are in-house methodologies, and there are one or two other more widely used methodologies, but I don't think there's any one that is showing signs of prevailing.
Right, and I don't think that we're going to reach, a consensus immediately. We're going to have, Alexandra Cousteau speaking later today about, carbon reduction, which she's doing with Carlos Duarte on carbon sequestration valuation. But I think it's going to take, an additional 1 or 2 years, to reach that point. But I think that it could be a good base. And you're right also on the fact that the cycle for carbon sequestration is less than forest, but it could be accelerated, and it's one opportunity. Andreea, coming back, to these new vehicles like, CO2 capture, the blue bonds, what do you think, Europe can do in terms of accelerating the deployment of these future potential drivers?
I think that first of all, probably pen in your agendas 14th of July, because the Commission is going to come with quite a big package, Fit for 55, looking at the level of ambition for decarbonization in terms of 2030. And there will be, of course, a lot of, I would say, interesting signals to look at. I think, again, that there are also, even before this, I would say, good perspectives from the investor perspective, but also for the industry, because automatically, I would say, based on what we need to achieve, things are going to change. We need to put less pressure on land, and we need as well to be able to develop, I would say, new sources of food and feed with a lower carbon footprint than most land-based sources. Currently, we are using quite a lot, I would say, the land sources. We are using the forest for the renewable energy, but we are going to need these forests for objectives linked to sequestration of CO2, but also protection of wilderness. So in terms of, I would say, regulatory framework, there will be announcements on 14th of July. And probably after this, we can have a more, I would say, detailed discussion if you like, Pierre. Before 14, we cannot say too much, I would say.
Love to. And Antonin, on the ESG part, how the EIB is trying to cope with these new objectives?
In terms of those new objectives, we've been, let's say, EIB has been, let's say we paid a lot of attention already, to ESGs, quite a long time ago. Because as you may remember, EIB, we were the first one to issue a green bond, and I think it was 15 years ago. It was 2007. And effectively, because now when you talk about green bonds, it's something that that many banks are doing. It became quite common. But I believe that when you mention blue bonds, for instance, I think at least the benefit of green bonds was also to raise awareness, in the public, but mainly also in the investor community. And it will also give an incentive, for investors, to do more. Given that that we all benchmark all ourselves, against other investors. So I think it's a good initiative, provided effectively that we all use the same definition, for ESG, as John mentioned, which is not always the case. And that's why, you may also recall that a few years ago, EIB, we created basically together with the UN. With the UN Environment Program Finance, we created effectively what was called the Sustainable Blue Economy Finance Principle initiative. And basically, the idea behind it was basically that we would put together, like a global framework. That would then guide other investors, typically banks, insurance companies, and private investors, so that we agree on a common approach to finance a sustainable blue economy. So basically, I would say the good news, so effectively, it's only a first step, but the good news is that I believe that now the initiative has about 50 members. And those members, they represent about $7 trillion, in total assets under management. So So effectively, then we can always argue that it's only a first step, but effectively, I think it's a good way also to give awareness in the market of of what initially some development banks were trying to do. Because I'm also expecting that in a few years. This kind of initiatives, will also be followed by mainstream investor or mainstream pension funds, in Europe or other geographies. Yeah, so that's why I believe even if effectively, as John was mentioning, even if effectively, quantifying or only looking at certain metrics, can be a bit misleading. At least it gives also a good. It gives, I believe, a good signal to the market, and ultimately, it will benefit as well, the whole blue economy, and and then effectively the seaweed sector.
I've got, before we go, for the takeaway message, I have a specific question related to seaweed bioplastic. One of our sponsors, Solid Blue, is participating, to this endeavor. Most of the companies that are in the seaweed bioplastic industry, they are tiny, innovative companies, and the problem is, the access to the raw material. So they need, to secure the future raw material for the future, and the innovation is nothing if you don't have the raw material. So regarding the specific bioplastic industry, what would be, the recommendation from the EU, from the DG, from the EIB, and from a private investor? What would be your recommendation in terms of what should be done, in terms of consolidation? Andreea, you want to start with that?
Yes, I can start, Pierre. I think that, first of all, of course, it has a quite probably a certain risk of in terms of investments, but nevertheless, probably we need in terms, because it's for sure that they will need, first of all, I would say, access to enough resources in order to allow them to produce something that an industry can take up. There are small, but nevertheless, I think, first of all, from the point of view of potential, an investor is going to look always not only at what can be invested in from the point of view of the technology, but also how much, I would say, resource is available in order this technology to be produced. So it's for this, I would say, small startups to be able to offer their solution into the market, we need also to give them access to, I would say, to the resource to be used. There is a risk in this investment, but in the same time, I think that there are clear political signals that we have to reconsider the plastic. I will mention as well, and you saw the level of ambition that was announced with the Zero Pollution Action Plan, in which a pollution of land, sea, and air were addressed, with the clear, I would say, communicating objective that we are able to reverse the trend, and also to try to clean, I would say, all the damage that was created. So there is, of course, all the, I would say, regulatory environment. Now, more than this, it's needed also to give them access to finance, and, as I said, to the resource to be used. So it's not probably on what, let's say, because on what money is available. Investors are going only to invest when they will see for sure that there is a perspective to make money out of this.
John, do you share the view, and do you think there's a bright future for the seaweed bioplastic? You're on mute.
I think it's an amazingly interesting area, and I think there's a very, very big future for seaweed-based bioplastic. or packaging in general. The biggest challenge is probably there needs to be either vertical consolidation, or in order to secure supply for these companies to survive, because many of them are speaking to some fantastic corporate customers, but all those corporate customers, if they're going to be serious about biodegradable, need to supply in sufficient volume. I think my sense is at the moment they need to that there's probably the only answer is vertical integration up and down the value chain. But I think that in due course, as you see, as I've seen in other industries, things can be separated within the value chain. So you have producers, refiners, and sellers. My sense is that sometimes those vertically integrate and then they break out again. My sense is at the moment they're all distinct. They probably need to consolidate, and then there's probably going to come a point where, as the business matures and the financial dynamics of each part of the value chain mature, my sense is they'll probably break out again and be standalone.
John, so Antonin, as the EIB and your scope is out of Europe and Africa is part of your geography sector, where you invest, I think that Africa stands a good chance, to be one of the key players in providing the future resources for bioplastic. How do you anticipate this, and what will be your recommendation for the future producers?
I mean, that's a good point. That's a good point. But as I'm not going to repeat on what Andreea just said, on regulation. But effectively, we see, I mean, in Africa, we see every day, lots of potential and and very interesting projects in many different sectors, including seaweed production and including aquaculture as well. But effectively, I think that regulation. We talked already about regulation. We talked already about access to permit or access to land, for onshore project. And I also believe that the biggest issue, as John was referring to, is also that effectively, sometimes, we see great projects, but we don't see a way to mitigate the market risk, basically. And so that's why, I mean, to me, if you look at what has been done, for instance, in a completely different industry, in the renewable energy industry. So effectively, the whole industry became bankable, and we basically managed to scale it up effectively, because at the end of the day, it was mainly due to the fact that effectively, we had some, we could finance a project on the basis of a very strong offtake agreement, on the basis of a bankable offtake agreement. So effectively, what I see that's something effectively that ideally we would like to see, for instance, and I know it would mean that the value chain is is at least integrated a minimum, but effectively, I believe it will really help, if we could see, or if we could start to see some kind of strong, kind of offtake commitments or offtake agreement, with some large names, typically the large names, in the retail industry or in the food industry, and I believe, that it would make, it would really help, in terms of then coming up with, with financing, and also bringing alongside us or other development banks, other private sector, other private sector equity or debt investor.
So we lost John again. I hope he can come, for the closing. Let me share some apologies, with from Isabelle de Crémou from Seventure. She's one of our partners, and she has been working with BioMarine for almost 15 years. So she's a believer of the blue bioeconomy. She is developing a new vertical, in terms of investment in the blue bioeconomy. And she regrets, that the board meeting was too long, but This is the type of thing that happens with investors, and we hope we can catch up in the next future with her, so she can announce more interesting development on her side. Time has come for the wrap up. Andreea, what will be your takeaway message?
It's just the fact that if we want seaweed really to happen in Europe, we need to, I would say, to work together. All the ones that are interested to make this happen. There are funds available. There are developments. Sometimes I think the tendency is stay too much, I would say, at a very probably local level, and we need to share, I would say, the good experiences, and we need to see how we can join forces. As I mentioned, Blue Invest, just to take this, is going to put a quite an important amount on the table for the industry. So we need to, as I said, to work together. We are offering also the support for all the companies that are interested to allow them to have access to this finance. So let's try to do it, and also let's try for all the ones that are interested to try to contact the ones that can offer something in order to allow this industry really to make a difference in the future. So this will be my main message, and probably it's needed not only for the seaweed but for a lot of other parts emerging, I would say, from for the blue economy.
For your continuous support and friendship. Antonin, 1 minute, wrapping and recommendation.
No, I mean, Pierre, thanks again, Pierre, for, I believe that, that this, this forum today, was really interesting and was a good opportunity, to discuss about the challenges and, and the solution that, that we can bring. But, I believe, it would be great, as usual, it would be great, to carry on, this kind of discussion all together, and also, also bringing around the table. I know it's a bit difficult these days with COVID, but I'm really hoping that that the next time we can meet all together, also with with startups, with SMEs, active in the sector in Europe and also outside Europe, so that we can effectively also engage a bit more practically, also to understand from them, what are the challenges. And to finish, I also agree with Andreea that effectively, yes, there are some EU funds available, from different sources, for the sector, but effectively, we also need, we also have to mobilize private investors. So we have to mobilize private equity funds, impact funds. We also have to mobilize, to make sure that that commercial banks are also on board. So that could be either through fundings that they get from EIB, for instance, or either other mechanism. But we have to make sure that we all together in this, including as well. Advisory firms for the, or advisor for the project preparation, incubators as well, to follow as well early stage companies. Yeah. No. So thanks again, and and I'm, on my side, I really, I'm really looking forward as well, for the next, for the next step. And I'm hoping that we'll do a lot. We'll do a lot together in the sector.
And for sure, we will bring you case, and I will conclude, for John as well. Send us, lots of case. We are working currently with John on many cases, including bioplastics, seaweed production. He's very knowledgeable. He gives, lots of very interesting advices. And I think that all together we can achieve something for the European community. And I think that seaweed has a bright future, and we need, to endorse more of this project and try, to accelerate and support the SMEs in their quest of seaweed development. Thank you so much. I invite you to log in the next session, which we start at 12:15 sharp, and then we start, the second part of our long seaweed around the clock journey that will end in British Columbia and Alaska. Thank you so much, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay,
Thank you.
Bye-bye.